Dragon's Dogma 2 is Capcom's new open-world RPG that takes their new RE engine to ambitious new heights by recreating their 13-year-old game with a shinier coat of paint. Cool flashy combat, a big fresh world to explore, and another big red dragon to slay. With all the previous game's charms and unique systems to modern player bases, but somehow, even with its shiny coat of paint, it still feels like it was designed like a PS2 game. I will try my best to not compare them heavily, but only reference certain mechanics between them. Anyone who has watched my Slippery Slope video though knows my exact thoughts on Capcom and microtransactions. So let's save those juicy bits for the end. I want to preface this by saying that I have about 69 hours in the game. I've also played around in New Game Plus, testing different classes and stuff that I liked the look of. I have probably seen most, if not all, this game has to offer, and quite enjoyed a lot of my experience. Obviously, I'm going to be spoiling the actual Dragon's Dogma out of this game, not specifically the story, but a lot of the end game areas and, stuff that's supposed to be secrets. So try to remember that before I say what I'm unfortunately about to say. Before any nitty-gritty, let's address some elephants in the room. Depending on your system, this game is like your mom at Dunkin' Donuts. She's 3 donuts down and she's reaching for a 4th, man. The performance is extremely mediocre. You'll probably spend a nice chunk of time adjusting graphic settings. Constant frame drops and stuttering in most areas throughout the game. After turning on DLSS Super Resolution, the performance in most open world areas seemed to improve a bit for me. My browser tabs were literally lagging with how many hardware resources this game was yoinking from it. If you have potential worries about being able to even run this game, I highly suggest that you probably should wait until it's fixed or just move on. Since I finished this game, they did a little mini patch that potentially fixes some issues, but it's so minor that I'm not sure it actually even did anything. De Nouveau, Dumb and Ugly, I feel like I needed to mention it because a lot of gamers get pretty upsetty spaghetti when you don't mention that this game has DRM in it. I personally didn't run into many bugs or crashes, maybe 1 or 2 crashes at the most, with most of my issues stemming from the game design itself. Forced into single save slot systems with no way of loading a previous save, other than quitting to the title screen before it saves. And good luck trying that with how many times this game saves the game. It's the only game I've ever had to use a save manager to comfortably play. For some context, Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen was a Western-styled RPG piloted by Hideaki Itsuno back in 2012. A man who knows a damn lot about what makes combat in a video game good. It was a diamond in the rough with a cult fan base behind its janky yet charming ideas. The story was never really a strong point in the game, so it's not surprising that the second game is in a similar situation, with it boiling down to a progression wall to prevent players from over-exploring parts of the game. The plot ultimately sums up to a tale of a fated duel between the Arisen and the evil dragon who stole your heart. As an Arisen, you must fight alongside your summoned pawn to put an end to the dragon's tirade on the realm. Pawns are a race of warriors that are denizens of the Rift, created purely by an Arisen. But as you trek closer to the main city where the Arisen is supposed to reign as sovereign, there are rumors that an Arisen has already claimed your title for themselves. I would explain more, but the story is definitely a story to say the least. Beat Big Dragon and look fucking cool doing it. That's it. They never really follow up on any other cool ideas other than the main gameplay cycle. This game's bread and butter will and was always solid gameplay with a big world to explore. The gameplay is a fun hybrid action hack and slash with a focus on stamina. You start off by picking between 4 base classes, or vocations as they're called in this game. There are a total of 10 vocations to choose from, with 3 new advanced ones that came with the second game. Dragon's Dogma 2 has incredibly fun gameplay with intricate systems and monster wrestling similar to Monster Hunter, combining various heavy and light attacks with 4 various skills you get to choose. And when it hits, man, oh, it hits good. Every single weapon and skill has this satisfying amount of weight behind every single hit. Climbing on their backs, cutting off monster parts, and even infecting them with a bunch of status effects. It's such a simple thing, but it makes 100% the difference. All the classes feature somewhat unique skill sets with a variety of gameplay styles. And let me not forget to gush over what's probably the best feeling magic in any video game, period. This was always true in the first game, and it's even more true in the second. What's more impressive is the amount of interactions monsters have with the environments, especially when you are the one causing those interactions. Toppling over a Cyclops, making them trip and bonk their head over rocks and cliff sides. It's the perfect amount of player interactivity that I would expect from a Monster Hunter game. Although in Monster Hunter, it's about hunting for specific monster parts by breaking and cutting them off to make specific armor sets and weapons. Whereas in Dragon's Dogma, it's more about hitting those weak points to open up opportunities for free damage. With a very rinse and repeat plan for each vocation. Unless you're Sorcerer, because then you can just do this shit. Which is weird because each monster behaves very differently. The game's formula is perfectly made to be one of the most replayable. However, with all these things combined, you start to realize how repetitious the gameplay can become. In Dark Arisen, there were a total of 9 vocations, but you could equip up to 6 skills compared to the second game's 4, which spiced up how you play the game and allowed you to prepare for specific fights with particular monsters. For some reason, they severely stripped down these vocations when remaking. An immediate victim of this problem is the Wayfarer vocation. I was initially excited for this hybrid class because it could equip every weapon in the game. Yet this class is affected by that skill reduction more so than others. Because of the nature of this class, Wayfarer loses 1 slot for the rearmament skill, which allows them to swap weapons on the fly. So ultimately, while being able to equip up to 9 weapons at once, you may only equip 3 skills max, which means 6 out of the 9 weapons that you will have equipped will have no skills whatsoever. This is such a weird flaw to willfully keep in. Each class in the original game had a choice of a primary and a secondary weapon. For example, Magic Archer in the original game had access to either a staff or daggers as a primary weapon alongside their secondary, which is the magic bow. A lot of the cool magic didn't even make it into the sequel. The dark and holy elements were removed from the game completely. And one of my favorite spells, the fucking lightning whip, Brontide, didn't make it in. Like, what the hell, man? That shit's fucking cool. The gameplay plus those mechanics is why I consider this game a side quote and not an actual sequel. The combat is very similar to Dark Arisen, along with enemies and bosses which are mostly reused. Even your pawns seem to take note of this.
The same foe, again.
The combat is very similar to the first game, along with the enemies and the bosses, which are mostly reused. It took all the way until post-game, the true ending, where I started to enjoy the combat again. This post-game adds a few unique bosses and more places to explore. Sadly, even the better parts of this game suffer from very weird design choices. This zone just had to have a forced time limit to put the icing on the cake. So just when you were starting to have fun with the combat again, they neutered you one last time. While Dark Arisen was in a similar situation, it had unique dungeons and a few more bosses added to the mix. But I also think it's justified to expect a sequel to supersede its previous game, not simply remake it with a mirage of a second game by putting a 2 after its name. And just for clarity, I went back and fully replayed Dark Arisen, and even the story is almost a 1-to-1 recreation. The only main difference being the post-game that so conveniently gives you an achievement called Dragon's Dogma 2. You couldn't even be more blatant with it if you tried. Regardless, the gameplay is the shiniest part of Dragon's Dogma 2. Very clearly what's strong-arming a lot of positive praise. The camera kind of sucks sometimes, but it serves its purpose. If anything, just use this handy FOV mod to offset some of its issues. A minor saving grace is the pawn system present in the Dragon's Dogma series. Just like you can build and adjust your character's stats, you can do the very same with your pawn, adding one last line of defense to spice up your gameplay. As long as you have the settings set, your pawn and others are sent to the Rift to be found and summoned by other players. The more your pawn is summoned in the Rift, the more that they learn about the world itself from other players' adventures, like the positions of chests and helpful objects, mainly ladders. This is especially cool because if you play the game alongside friends, they get to summon your pawn for free without any cost, no matter what level they are. Not to mention, you can basically trade items with other players whenever you dismiss a pawn back to their world. While I'm sure the game could benefit in some way or another by having co-op, it's an exceptionally social game similar to From Software's online mode. The world of Dragon's Dogma is a beautiful world filled with grass and trees and even more trees. From the facial animations, the character models, and the voice acting are all incredible.
Oi! Who goes there?
I just gotta take a moment and stare in awe at what is possible in the RE engine. I'm truly convinced that Capcom can use this engine to make any game genre possible if they at least try. The world mainly takes place between two major nations, Vermund and Batal. Compared to the first game, it's a relatively bigger map with plenty to explore, having a few dungeons and many caves scattered throughout the map. Other than points of interest, the game is peppered with various groups of mobs and monsters to help break up the monotony of only having two major biomes. The main way of traversal is sprinting through its giant landscapes or riding ox carts between towns as a mini way to fast travel. This game does indeed have other ways of travel, but it's extremely limited to items called fairy stones and port crystals. Fairy stones are the currency needed to fast travel, which isn't very rare, but still sparse within a single playthrough. While port crystals are static items that, once placed, the player can use these fairy stones to teleport to them. This isn't a new thing though, because this is the same system used in the previous game. In the first game though, there was a DLC item called the Eternal Fairy Stone. This fairy stone was given to everyone when the first game bundled together to make its Dark Arisen version. Many people would lead you to believe that this game's main problem is not being able to fast travel freely, but I disagree. It's more of a compounding issue when combined with its quest design. Almost every single quest in this game leads to one of 4 actions. Go clear out a cave, deliver an item, find an item, or escort someone to safety. Normally, shit like that would be saved purely as filler for side quests, but that's just how every single quest in this game ends up being. There are probably like 3 side quests in total that I can remember vividly. The riddles of the Sphinx are probably one of the most interesting ones. Not because I like riddles or puzzles, mind you, but because she is the most interesting and fascinating to interact with. She's the only character in this game with unique facial animations and a lot of unique dialogue.
Well sought and well found.
But not enough for me to be interested to go and find her again. I completed her first 6 trials and then kinda just stopped. Now, if they stripped away the dozens of fetch, return, and escort missions, chunks of the gameplay wouldn't be filled with aimless exploration. There is an abundant amount of ping-ponging between the same NPCs just to complete all their quests. Go talk to this guy, then deliver an item to this other guy, and then travel all the way back to the same guy you talked to for the first part. It gets boring so quickly. The director had a pretty take, as the Twitter users like to say. In an interview with IGN, he stated, if travel is boring, it's only an issue if your game is boring. Realistically, I kind of agree with his statement. However, if the main part of the gameplay is exploring and your way of making it not boring is random monster encounters, I don't think you're accomplishing your goal if that's all your exploration amounts to. In Breath of the Wild, the moment you walk out of that first shrine, you instantly spot a handful of locations that make you want to explore. But on top of that, you have another means to traverse with climbing and the paraglider. Dragon's Dogma 2 just doesn't have strong enough environments to make exploration interesting enough to be designed like this. They use paths in this game to guide you to more points of interest, but 9 times out of 10, you find a cave dungeon to explore because there are literally dozens of them. I mean, just take a good look at Elden Ring's completed map compared to Dragon's Dogma. I'll wait. They seem to purely rely on flashy and fun gameplay to make players want to engage with exploration, which then turns into more combat. However, the fun combat requires you to have more things to whack your weapons at. Yet for a game so heavily favoring its combat, I never thought I would grow so tired of it. If you're running down the road to your next quest, it won't be long before you're forced into combat, which is a problem because you're incentivized to swap vocations semi-frequently. But no matter how many times you swap classes, you will never get past the monotonous cycle of mashing the same 4 buttons on the same couple of enemies for the past hour. Dragon's Dogma 2 is a sequel that's barely deserving of the title it was given, with a very stripped down systems and mechanics compared to the first game. The only severely improved system is the Pawn's AI. A lot of the commands in that game doesn't seem to be worth shit. The combat in the Pawn system carries this game hard, but maybe a bit too hard. For anyone looking for a cool, mindless version of Monster Hunter, then by all means, this game is for you. It has a beautiful world and giant fantasy monsters to hunt and loot that still makes for a good experience, but probably not for $70. Mindless fun can only last so long. Maybe pick up Monster Hunter World instead, since it does a better job at keeping gameplay consistently fresh. Now to finally talk about the boogeyman that's been hiding in everyone's closet. Dragon's Dogma 2 is a single player game shoehorned with the most worthless microtransactions I've seen in a long time. The main item that people seem to have issues with is the port crystals, which technically does count as a fast travel item. Meanwhile, the only thing they don't sell are fairy stones. You're paying $2.99 for the idea of fast traveling, so it's even more of a waste of money than you initially thought it was. A token term that I heard for this is the Capcom idiot tax, which I thought was pretty fucking funny, and I think I'll use that from now on in the future. I wonder if they're gonna pull a similar move to the first entry, and in a year's time, they'll be announcing Dragon's Dogma 2, The Darkest Arisen. That'll be all for me today. Take care, everybody.